Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Relaxing. Tonight we step into a night so cold it seems to ring when you breathe, a night where the sky is sharp with stars and the ground crunches softly beneath your feet. You're standing far from walls, far from chimneys, far from anything that looks like a modern home. There is no fireplace waiting for you. There is no switch to flip, no thermostat to nudge upward. Just darkness, wind, and the quiet knowledge that if you do this wrong, you probably will not survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Somewhere it is morning. Somewhere else, like here, night is settling in. Now dim the lights and let your shoulders loosen as you imagine the cold pressing in from every direction. You are not alone out here, you never were. One of the first things you learn long before fireplaces exist is that solitude is dangerous when the temperature drops. The cold is not dramatic, it does not rush at you, it simply waits. You feel it creeping through your boots, sliding up your legs, resting its weight on your chest. Ancient people understood this sensation intimately. During the last ice age, average temperatures in many regions were several degrees colder than today, a simple fact that meant nights could be lethal even without storms. You adjust your breathing, slow, steady. Every exhale forms a small cloud that drifts away and vanishes. That breath matters, warm air leaving your body as energy lost, and people long ago learned to notice that loss without knowing the word energy. You turn slightly so your face is not directly into the wind. This is not instinct. It is memory passed down, corrected, refined. You look up. The sky tells you things if you know how to read it. Clear nights are beautiful, but they are often the coldest. Clouds, as annoying as they seem, trap heat. Ancient groups noticed that too. A cloudless sky meant sharper cold by morning. This is a mainstream understanding confirmed by modern meteorology, but long before charts and satellites it lived as quiet wisdom shared by firesides that were not always there. Without fireplaces, warmth begins long before sleep. It starts with awareness. You listen to the wind, you smell the air. Dry cold bites differently than damp cold. Damp cold seeps, dry cold stings. Somewhere behind you others are moving not randomly but with purpose. No one wants to sweat. Sweat is a future problem, a wet enemy waiting for nightfall. Here is a quirky detail you might not expect. Some Arctic groups much later would rub animal fat into their hair and skin not for beauty, but to reduce heat loss and block wind. It smells strong, earthy, a little sour. You catch a hint of it now, carried faintly on the air, and it reminds you that survival is rarely elegant. As you walk, you keep the pace measured. Too fast and you overheat. Too slow and the cold settles deeper. This balance is earned through error, and not everyone survives the lessons. You think about the people who came before you, generations who tested the night with their own bodies, until patterns emerged. Historians still argue whether these behaviours were conscious strategies or simply habits reinforced by survival itself. You reach a place that feels right, not the lowest point where cold air pools, not the highest ridge where wind scours everything bare. Somewhere in between. This choice matters. Even a difference of a few steps can mean warmer air or biting drafts. You stamp your feet gently, not to warm them, but to settle the ground. Sound carries strangely in cold air, sharper, clearer. Every movement feels louder than it should. There is a softness beneath the surface here. Snow, grass, packed earth, it hardly matters. What matters is insulation. The ground steals heat faster than air ever will. Ancient people noticed that lying directly on bare earth meant waking up stiff numb, or not waking up at all. So you prepare the space. Spreading plant matter hides anything that traps pockets of air. Still air is warmth. You crouch, feeling the cold bite at your knees. Your hands are clumsy, now thickened by chill. Dexterity fades before strength. This is another truth learned early. Tasks are done before fingers stop listening to your brain. You work calmly, panic wastes heat. Nearby someone hums quietly. Not a song exactly, more like a vibration. Even soft sound reminds you that you are part of a group. There is comfort in that. There is heat in that too. Bodies close together change the night. A single human struggles. Several humans create a small climate of their own. Here is another mainstream fact woven into the night. Human bodies generate heat constantly even at rest. In cold conditions, this heat can be shared. Communal sleeping was common across many ancient societies, not primarily for bonding but for survival. The idea of sleeping alone in a cold environment would have seemed reckless. You lower yourself down, not fully lying yet. You test the air. You pull material around your shoulders, careful not to trap moisture near your mouth. Breathing into coverings can create frost, a dangerous dampness by morning. Some groups even position their heads carefully to let breath escape without chilling the body. It sounds precise because it is. There is a debate among scholars about how much of this knowledge was intuitive versus taught through explicit instruction. Some argue that children learned simply by copying adults. Others suggest formal teaching moments existed especially after harsh winters. The truth likely shifts depending on place and time. As you finally settle, you feel the night pressing closer but not quite winning. Your heart rate slows, muscles relax just enough. The cold does not leave, but it becomes manageable. That is the goal, not comfort, survival. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The wind moves differently now, sliding over shapes that break its force. Somewhere an animal shifts, digging into its own shelter. You're not so different. This is the first lesson of the coldest nights. You do not conquer them, you negotiate. And as your breathing evens out, you understand that every choice tonight, where you stand, how you move, who you lie beside, is part of a long human conversation with the cold that has been going on for tens of thousands of years, whispered quietly under the stars. You wake without opening your eyes, not because something is wrong, but because the cold has shifted. It always does. Night is not a fixed thing. It moves, settles, rearranges itself while you lie still. Somewhere above you the stars have rotated, and the air has grown slightly sharper. You sense it on your cheeks first. Skin knows before thought does. You stay still. This is important. Ancient people learned that sudden movement wastes heat. Instead, you listen. The wind tells stories if you let it. A steady whisper means stability. A sudden silence can mean snow moving in. A rising howl suggests trouble before dawn. Long before weather apps, this was forecasting done with ears and bones. You open your eyes just enough to see the sky. The stars look brittle tonight, like they might crack. That clarity is a warning. Clear skies mean heat escapes upward, drifting off into space. Modern science confirms this radiative cooling effect, but here, thousands of years earlier, it is simply known. A night like this demands preparation, not panic. You remember what the elders always said, even if they never wrote it down. Cold sinks, warmth rises. Valleys are traps after sunset. That is why you are here, halfway up a gentle slope. Cold air slides past you, pulling below. It is subtle, but you feel the difference. Your breath fogs less than it would down there. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the others. Someone nearby exhales slowly, rhythm steady. Shared breathing becomes a kind of metronome. It tells you everything is still fine. If breathing around you changed, you would know before anyone spoke. Ancient groups watched the sky constantly, not in a poetic way, but in a practical one. A halo around the moon often meant moisture in the air, and moisture meant colder, heavier nights. The absence of a moon meant deeper darkness, which changed how predators moved. These were not superstitions exactly. They were observations repeated until they stuck. Here is a small, surprising detail. Some cultures associated certain star patterns with dangerous cold snaps, not because the stars caused the cold, but because those patterns appeared during particular seasons. Over time, memory tied them together. When that cluster rose, people prepared more bedding. You feel a faint comfort knowing that humans once read the sky like a calendar written in light. You roll gently onto your side, reducing the surface area exposed to the air. Curling inward is not weakness. It is geometry. Less exposed skin means less heat loss. You tuck your hands close to your chest. Fingers go first if you are careless. Toes soon after. Ancient people knew this without naming frostbite. They knew numbness was a warning, not a relief. The ground beneath you has changed too. As night deepens, it stiffens, pulling warmth downward. That is why layers beneath you matter more than layers above. This is a mainstream fact often overlooked even today. Insulation under the body prevents conductive heat loss. Long ago, people noticed that even thick coverings failed if the ground was bare. You reach down and adjust the plant matter beneath you. Dry grasses, reeds, maybe bark. Anything that traps air works. Air does not move well when trapped, and still air is warmth. This principle appears again and again across cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Historians still debate whether this represents shared ancestral knowledge or independent discovery driven by the same physics. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snaps. You tense for a moment, then relax. Animals move at night too, especially when cold sharpens hunger. You are quiet. Silence conserves energy. Talking, even whispering, wastes heat and moisture. This is not a storytelling night. This is a listening night. You think about how ancient people predicted not just cold, but how bad it would be. Wind direction mattered. A north wind carried different danger than a west wind. Smells change too. Cold air often smells clean, almost metallic. Damp, cold smells heavy, earthy. You breathe in carefully. Tonight smells dry. That is something you can work with. There is an old debate among researchers about whether prehistoric people could anticipate sudden freezes days in advance. Some argue that animal behavior offered clues. Birds flying low. Herd shifting early. Others say this gives too much credit to pattern recognition. But lying here, feeling the air, you suspect the truth sits somewhere in between. You do not need certainty. You need enough warning to act. Your mind drifts briefly to later societies, to Stone Age camps and early villages. Even without permanent fireplaces, people positioned shelters to catch morning sun and block prevailing winds. Orientation mattered. Facing openings away from night winds could mean the difference between sleep and shivering. This knowledge spread quietly, reinforced by survival. You adjust your breathing again, slow inhales through the nose, exhales measured. Breathing through the nose warms air slightly before it hits the lungs. Mouth breathing cools the body faster. Another small thing learned through cold nights and stiff mornings. Here is a fringe tidbit that still fascinates scholars. Some groups believe certain nights were colder because spirits moved through the land. While the explanation was spiritual, the behavior it encouraged was practical. On those nights, people stayed closer together and used extra bedding. Belief became protection regardless of cause. The wind shifts slightly, brushing your face from a new angle. You pull a covering higher, shielding your cheekbones. Exposed bone cools faster. This is why faces feel cold first. You remember a story about someone who ignored that sting, only to wake with skin damaged beyond repair. Stories carry warnings better than rules. You notice how quiet everything is. Cold dampens sound once snow settles. The world feels padded, hushed. That silence can be comforting or unsettling. Tonight it feels like a held breath. Dawn will come eventually. It always does. But you cannot rush it. As you settle back into stillness, you realize something important. Surviving cold nights without fireplaces was never about one trick or one invention. It was about stacking small advantages, reading the sky, choosing the right ground, moving just enough, breathing just right. None of it dramatic, all of it necessary. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you understand that this quiet attention to the world around you is not just survival. It is connection. You're part of the night, not fighting it, simply existing within its rule, waiting patiently for the faint light that will eventually soften the cold. You feel the cold most clearly where fabric meets skin. Every seam, every fold, every place where air sneaks in announces itself quietly. Clothing before comfort is strategy. Long before anyone cared about style, ancient people cared deeply about coverage. You shift slightly and feel the weight of layered hides resting over your shoulders. Not elegant, not tailored, but effective. The first thing you notice is how uneven it all feels. One side warmer, one side cooler. This is normal. Early clothing was rarely symmetrical. Pieces were wrapped, tied, overlapped. That overlapping mattered. Gaps were dangerous. People learned to orient seams away from prevailing winds, even if they never used those words. You adjust instinctively, turning your body so the thickest layers face the breeze. Mainstream archaeology confirms that tailored clothing appears surprisingly early in human history. Bone needles dating back tens of thousands of years suggest that people were not just draping skins but shaping them. Shaping meant better fit. Better fit meant trapped air. Trapped air meant warmth. You feel that truth now pressed gently against your chest. The hides smell faintly of smoke even though no fire burns tonight. Smoke clings for a long time and it does more than mark material. It discourages insects, slows decay, and slightly waterproofs fibers. This is not accidental. Ancient people noticed that smoked skins, substance, lasted longer and performed better in damp cold. The scent, sharp and familiar, becomes a quiet reassurance. You pull the material tighter around your legs. Legs lose heat fast. They are long exposed, full of muscle that cools quickly when still. That is why ancient clothing often emphasized wraps, leggings, or layered skirts rather than simple cloaks. Coverage mattered more than convenience. You tuck the edge under your thigh to block a draft creeping along the ground. Here is a quirky detail that still surprises people. Some groups wore fur with the hair facing inward, not outward. Modern intuition often suggests hair out for warmth, but inward fur traps air closer to the skin and reduces convection. Outward hair sheds snow and rain. Different conditions demanded different choices. You feel the fur brushing your skin. Soft, insulating, alive in a way modern fabric rarely is. Preparation mattered as much as material. Untreated hides stiffen in cold, becoming armor rather than clothing. Treated hides remain supple. Softness equals flexibility. Flexibility equals less energy wasted fighting your own clothes. Ancient tanning methods varied widely using brains, fats, even fermented mixtures. The exact recipes are debated, but the results speak clearly. Historians still argue whether certain tanning techniques spread through cultural contact or emerged independently in different regions. Standing here in the cold, the debate feels distant. What matters is that someone figured it out, tested it, passed it on. Knowledge became inheritance. You feel for the edges near your neck. The neck is vulnerable. Blood flows close to the surface. Exposed skin here chills the whole body. That is why collars, scarves, or simple wraps appear so early in the archaeological record. You pull a strip of hide higher, feeling immediate relief as the draft disappears. Your hands are next. Fingers are tricky. Gloves restrict movement, but bare fingers lose heat fast. Many ancient solutions involve mittens rather than gloves. Shared space for fingers reduces surface area. You tuck your hands together inside a loose wrap, palms facing heat pooling slowly between them. Here is a fringe tidbit whispered among experimental archaeologists. Some reconstructions suggest that early people intentionally oversized their clothing not for growth, but to allow extra layering of grasses or feathers inside. Clothing became a container adaptable night to night. You imagine stuffing dried plants into a tunic, feeling bulkier but warmer, like wearing your shelter. You shift again, careful not to compress the insulation beneath you. Compression squeezes air out, reducing warmth. This is why loose layers often outperform tight ones. It is a lesson rediscovered every winter by people wearing fashionable but impractical coats. Moisture is the enemy you fear most. Wet clothing steals heat rapidly. Ancient people knew this through bitter experience. They avoided sweating during the day so their clothes would stay dry at night. This required restraint. No sprinting, no unnecessary labour as evening approached. Discipline mattered. You sniff the air again. Dry. Good. You flex your toes slightly, just enough to keep blood moving. Movement generates heat, but too much creates sweat. Balance again. Always balance. Somewhere nearby, someone adjusts their own coverings, the faint rustle of hide against hide. You are all wrapped, differently customised by body shape age roll. Elders often received the best materials not out of sentiment, but because losing them meant losing memory. Children were bundled thickly, sometimes comically so, because small bodies lose heat faster. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about whether clothing alone could sustain warmth in extreme cold without fire. Most agree it was never clothing alone. Clothing worked as part of a system that included shelter, diet, behaviour. But tonight, clothing is your frontline defence, and you respect it deeply. As the night stretches on, you notice how the material warms, where it touches you, slowly adapting to your shape. This is comfort ancient style. Not luxury, just the quiet absence of pain. You let your breathing slow again, chest rising gently under layers shaped by many hands across generations. Each stitch, each knot, each fold is a decision made by someone who survived long enough to teach it. And wrapped in that inheritance, you rest knowing that warmth is not something you find. It is something you build patiently, piece by piece. The night presses on, and with it comes a quieter lesson, one learned not by wearing skins, but by understanding them. You feel the hide beneath your fingers as you shift slightly, noticing how it bends instead of cracking. This is not luck. This is preparation layered on preparation, the kind that begins long before winter ever arrives. Animal skins are not all the same. You know this the way you know the weight of your own body. Some are thin but dense, others thick but brittle. The difference is not just the animal, but the work done afterward. Long accepted archaeological evidence shows that early humans invested enormous time in processing hides, sometimes more time than hunting itself. That effort paid off on nights like this. You inhale and catch that familiar scent again. Earthy, oily, slightly sharp. It tells you the skin has been worked properly. Untreated hides stiffen in cold locking joints, resisting movement. Treated hides stay alive, in a sense, moving with you, trapping warmth without fighting back. You flex your shoulder gently, confirming that this one will not betray you before dawn. Preparation methods varied wildly across regions. Some groups soaked skins in fat and worked them for days. Others used mixtures that sound unpleasant even now. Brain tissue, surprisingly effective, contains emulsifiers that soften fibers. This is one of those details that modern people often find strange, but it worked. Every animal carried the means to preserve its own hide. You appreciate the efficiency of that, even if you never say it out loud. There is still disagreement among researchers about how standardized these techniques were. Some believe methods were closely guarded family knowledge. Others think they spread quickly between groups through trade or intermarriage. Lying here wrapped in the result you suspect, both are true depending on the place and the people. You notice how the hide behaves differently, where it touches moisture from your breath. Slightly cooler, slightly heavier. This is why placement matters. Experienced people positioned seams and overlaps away from mouths and noses, keeping dampness from settling in critical areas. You adjust the edge near your chin just enough to let breath escape sideways. One overlooked detail is how skins were layered. It was rarely just one hide. Multiple thin layers outperform one thick one. Each layer traps air. Each boundary slows heat loss. This is not modern theory. It is lived experience repeated across thousands of winters. You feel the layered warmth, now gentle and steady. Some skins were chosen specifically for sleeping rather than movement. Soft inner hide beneath, tougher outer layers above. The combination mattered. Movement skins needed durability. Sleeping skins needed loft. People knew the difference. Excavated sites show wear patterns that suggest specific items were reserved for nighttime use, not daily labour. You shift your legs again, careful not to expose bare skin. The hide slides smoothly, not sticking. That smoothness reduces friction, which reduces noise. Silence at night is protection. Predators listen as much as they hunt. Quiet warmth is safer than noisy comfort. Here is a lesser-known practice that still fascinates anthropologists. Some groups lightly perforated hides in specific patterns, not enough to let air through freely, but enough to increase flexibility and reduce stiffness in extreme cold. These tiny holes may have helped prevent cracking. You imagine running your fingers across such a surface, barely noticing the difference but feeling the benefit. Moisture management remains your biggest concern. Even the best hide fails when wet. That is why drying and storage mattered so much. Skins were aired, smoked and folded carefully. They were kept off damp ground whenever possible. You glance down, reassured that your bedding keeps everything elevated. You think briefly about rain and snow. Fur outward sheds precipitation. Fur inward traps warmth. People adapted depending on climate. In wetter regions, outward fur dominated. In dry, bitter cold, inward fur appeared more often. No universal rule, just adaptation. There is an ongoing conversation among experts about whether some Ice Age groups used early forms of waterproofing beyond smoke and fat. Certain residues found on ancient skins hint at plant resins or waxes. The evidence is incomplete, but the idea lingers. You like the thought of someone experimenting, failing, trying again, all for nights like this. Your hands rest on your stomach now, tucked beneath layers. Core warmth protects everything else. This was understood intuitively. Clothing focused on the torso first, extremities came second. That is why ancient garments often look bulky around the body and minimal at the limbs. You feel your breathing slow further, chest rising against the soft resistance of hide. It almost feels like being held. That is not sentimental. It is mechanical. Pressure reduces air movement. Reduced air movement conserves heat. Comfort emerges from physics, whether you know the word or not. Nearby this someone shifts, and he mutters softly, half asleep. You catch the sound of hide brushing hide. It is comforting. Everyone here is wrapped in labour. Hours of scraping, stretching, smoking, sewing, all of it concentrated into this quiet moment of rest. There is still uncertainty about how early people judged when a hide was ready. Some suggest smell was the key indicator. Others point to flexibility tests or sound when bent. Whatever the method, mistakes were costly. A poorly prepared skin could mean a dangerous night. Knowledge mattered. You press your cheek briefly against the hide beneath your head. It is warmer now, shaped by your heat. This material remembers you at least for the night. That memory is what keeps you alive until morning. As sleep edges closer, you realize something subtle. Warmth here does not come from adding more and more. It comes from knowing enough. Enough layers, enough treatment, enough care. And wrapped in that quiet expertise, you drift, trusting that the hands which prepared this skin knew exactly what they were doing. You notice the way the cold changes shape as you settle deeper into the night. It is no longer just something in the air. It presses against surfaces, flows around edges, slips through gaps. Shelter, you learn, is not simply a place to hide. It is something that works with the cold, not against it. You imagine the structure around you, even if it is little more than a low frame and coverings. Early shelters rarely stood tall. Height wastes warmth. Heat rises and tall spaces let it escape. Archaeological remains from many Ice Age camps show dwellings built low and wide, hugging the ground like cautious animals. You feel that logic now, as the roof sits close above you, holding your warmth instead of letting it drift away. The materials matter, but the shape matters more. Rounded forms deflect wind. Sharp corners invite it. You picture the shelter bending the airflow around itself, reducing the force that reaches you inside. This is not theory. Wind tunnel studies on reconstructed ancient huts show significant reductions in internal airflow when curves replace angles. Long before studies, people felt the difference in their bones. You shift slightly and hear the faint rustle of layered coverings overhead. Bark, hides, woven grasses. Each layer serves a role. Some block wind, others trap air, others shed moisture. No single material does everything well. That is why shelters were composites assembled thoughtfully from what the land offered. The ground beneath you has been shaped too, slightly hollowed just enough to seat the body. Not a pit that traps cold air, but a shallow nest that stabilizes temperature. People learn this through failure. Too deep and the cold settles in. Too flat and wind sneaks under edges. You feel the balance beneath you now. There is evidence from excavated sites that some shelters were rebuilt repeatedly in the same location. Each version improves slightly. This suggests not permanence, but learning. People remembered which designs worked, which collapsed, which leaked. Over time, shelters became smarter, even if no one called it architecture. You breathe in and notice the smell inside, dry, organic, familiar. A good shelter smells neutral, damp smells a danger. Mold weakens materials, moisture steals heat. People learn to vent shelters just enough to let moisture escape without inviting cold air in. Small openings placed carefully. High enough to release warm, wet air, low enough to avoid drafts at sleeping level. Here is an unexpected detail that often gets overlooked. Some ancient shelters used double walls with a gap filled with loose material. Leaves, moss, snow even. Snow, surprisingly, is an excellent insulator when packed. Trapped air again. You imagine pressing snow between layers, watching it freeze into a protective shell. Cold protecting against cold. Researchers remain uncertain how widespread this practice was, but examples appear across different regions, suggesting it was rediscovered multiple times. It is hard to ignore something that works this well. You adjust your position to face away from the shelter opening. Openings are necessary, but they are vulnerabilities. Ancient shelters rarely face prevailing winds. Orientation mattered. This is confirmed by site layouts where entrances consistently align away from dominant wind directions. You feel the difference immediately. Less air movement, less bite. Sound behaves differently inside. The wind becomes a low murmur instead of a howl. This is not just comforting, it helps you rest. Stress burns energy, calm conserves it. Shelter provides psychological warmth as much as physical. You think about how shelters were shared. Rarely alone. People clustered together, their combined body heat raising internal temperatures noticeably. Experimental reconstructions show that even a few bodies can increase shelter temperature by several degrees. That difference can mean sleep instead of shivering. There is still debate about whether shelters were primarily seasonal or used year-round. Some argue they were abandoned after winter. Others suggest repairs and reuse. Looking around, you see signs of care. Reinforced joints, smoothed surfaces. This feels like a place meant to last at least through the season. You listen to the quiet sounds of others breathing nearby. The shelter feels alive, responding to movement settling softly. Materials expand and contract with temperature changes. A living thing as much as any structure can be. You pull your coverings closer and feel the shelter doing its work. The cold does not vanish, but it slows, dulled by layers and chip up and shared warmth. Outside, the night continues its long watch. Inside, you exist in a pocket carved carefully from the dark. As your thoughts grow heavier, you realize that shelter was never about domination of the environment. It was about cooperation, using wind, using snow, using earth, letting the land help you survive itself. And wrapped in that quiet understanding, you rest trusting the walls around you to hold just long enough for morning light to return. You notice the way the cold feels different when it settles on snow. Softer somehow, less sharp, almost padded. Snow, which seems like the enemy at first glance, becomes an unlikely ally when understood properly. Ancient tribes learned this lesson slowly, often painfully, until it became second nature. You step outside the shelter briefly in your mind and imagine a landscape shaped by frost and ice. Everything reflects light. Sound travels farther. The world feels erased. Yet here people discovered that snow itself could be shaped into protection. Packed snow blocks wind better than bare ground ever could. It traps air so effectively that the inside of a snow shelter can feel almost mild compared to the open night. Evidence from Arctic and subarctic regions shows that snow-based structures were not crude improvisations but carefully designed spaces. Igloo-like forms appear relatively late in history, but earlier snow walls and windbreaks existed long before. These were built quickly, often in arcs, or partial rings placed upwind of sleeping areas. You imagine crouching behind one, feeling the wind skim overhead instead of slicing through you. Ice played a role too. In some regions, slabs of ice were leaned together to create temporary barriers, not homes exactly, but shields. Ice blocks wind and reflects body heat inward. It sounds counterintuitive, but cold materials can still serve warmth when they stop airflow. This is a principle modern insulation relies on as well, even if it uses different materials. You remember how silence deepens in snowy landscapes? Snow absorbs sound, creating a hushed stillness. This quiet was useful. It allowed people to hear approaching animals more clearly. It also calmed the mind. Calm conserves energy. Anxiety burns it. Here is a strange but telling habit observed in several cold-adapted cultures. People sometimes slept partially buried in snow with only their faces exposed. The snow formed a cocoon shielding the body from wind. This was not reckless behavior. It was calculated. Snow temperatures remain relatively stable, often warmer than the surrounding air during extreme cold snaps. Experts remain divided on how common this practice truly was. Some argue it was a last resort, others suggest it was a known technique used selectively. Either way, the concept reveals a deep understanding of thermal balance. You feel the imagined weight of snow pressing gently against your coverings, not crushing, just holding. Pressure reduces air movement. Reduced movement means retained warmth. Again and again, the same principle appears learned without formulas. Inside snow shelters, light behaves differently. It glows softly, filtered through ice crystals. This diffused light reduces glare and strain. It also makes the space feel enclosed and safe. You can see without harsh contrast, which helps tired eyes relax. Moisture management becomes critical here. Snow melts from body heat. Meltwater must be directed away. Floors are shaped with slight channels. Sleeping platforms are raised. Archaeological reconstructions show deliberate interior contours designed to keep occupants dry. Dry means alive. There is no full agreement among researchers about how early these techniques developed. Some believe they emerged only in extreme environments. Others point to similar principles used in milder climates with earth and vegetation. Snow simply replaced dirt and grass when those disappeared. You imagine lying inside such a shelter now. The outside temperature brutal, inside stillness. Your breath fogs softly, then drifts upward and out through a small vent. Venting prevents ice build-up inside, which could otherwise rain frost onto sleepers. Small details like this made the difference between comfort and danger. One overlooked detail is how snow shelters aged. They had to be maintained. Walls thickened as temperatures dropped. Weak spots repaired daily. This required awareness even when tired. Survival demanded attention, not just strength. You think about children learning this. How they were taught to feel snow density with their hands, to listen for hollow sounds that indicated weakness. Knowledge passed quietly, hands guiding hands, not through lectures. As you settle back into stillness, you realize that snow and ice were never just obstacles. They were tools, shaped, stacked, trusted. Cold did not only threaten, it offered materials uniquely suited to defending against itself. Your breathing slows again. The imagined shelter holds. Outside wind slides harmlessly across smooth curves of frozen walls. Inside warmth lingers fragile but enough, and for tonight enough is everything. You shift closer to the others without fully waking, drawn by warmth the way a hand drifts towards sunlight. Sleep in the cold is rarely solitary. Even now you feel how the air changes when bodies gather. It grows softer, less eager to steal heat. Long before anyone measured temperature, people noticed this and adjusted their nights accordingly. You settle into a shared rhythm of breathing. Inhale, exhale, not synchronized on purpose, but gradually aligning anyway. Several bodies together create a pocket of warmth that no single person could manage alone. Excavated sleeping areas from early camps often show clustered impressions, rather than isolated ones, suggesting people slept shoulder to shoulder whenever space allowed. You tuck your knees, slightly fitting into the curve of another person's back, not for comfort exactly, but efficiency. Curved shapes leave fewer gaps. Straight lines invite drafts. This is geometry learned by living through winter. You feel the heat radiating through layers of hide, slow but steady. There is a faint sound of teeth chattering somewhere, quickly stilled as someone shifts closer. Cold is communal work. If one person struggles, others feel it too. Groups that survive learn to adjust, silently redistributing warmth without discussion. It was instinct shaped by experience. An unusual habit appears in some ancient accounts and reconstructions. People sometimes alternated sleeping positions through the night, rotating, who lay on the outside of the group and who stayed in the center. This shared the burden of exposure. No one froze alone. It's a small thing, but it speaks volumes about cooperation under pressure. How formal this practice was remains unclear. Some researchers think it was deliberate. Others believe it happened naturally as people stirred and resettled. Either way, the result was the same. Heat was shared, risk was spread. You notice how your breathing feels warmer now. The air around your face carries traces of others' faint warmth lingering between breaths. Carbon dioxide levels rise slightly in enclosed spaces, which can make you feel drowsy. In moderation, this encourages sleep. Too much would be dangerous, but careful venting kept it safe. Ancient people may not have known the chemistry, but they knew the feeling. You adjust the covering over the group, pulling it lower along the outer edge. The inside stays warm. The outside blocks wind. Shared coverings were common, judging by the size of hides found at some sites. One large skin over several bodies works better than many small ones. Fewer seams, less heat loss. You listen to the sounds around you. Soft breathing. Occasional shifting. No one speaks. Talking breaks the fragile bubble of warmth with cold air. Silence protects everyone. The shelter itself seems to settle as the group stills. Children were often placed in the center where warmth was most stable. Elders too, their bodies less able to generate heat. This arrangement was practical, not sentimental. Losing knowledge carriers weakened the group. Warmth followed value. There is quiet disagreement among specialists about how early this kind of social organization developed. Some argue it required advanced planning. Others suggest it emerged automatically wherever cold made cooperation unavoidable. Lying here, you suspect cold itself taught the lesson quickly. Your own body begins to relax more fully. Muscles unclench, heartbeat slows. The warmth around you is not hot, but it is enough. Enough means you can rest without burning calories, shivering. Enough means you might wake up. You feel the ground less now. Shared heat warms the layers beneath you. The cold still exists, but it feels farther away, like a distant noise rather than an immediate threat. You drift towards sleep with the comforting knowledge that you are not carrying this night alone. Survival here is not about toughness, it is about closeness. About understanding that warmth multiplies when shared. As your thoughts blur, you realize this way of sleeping shaped more than survival. It shaped trust. People learned whose breathing stayed steady, who shifted too much, who needed more space. Night after night, bonds formed quietly, reinforced by the simple fact that bodies kept each other alive. Your eyelids grow heavy, the group breathes, the shelter holds. Outside, the cold waits patiently, but inside, warmth circulates gently enough to carry you through the darkest hours. You wake just enough to feel your body working even while you rest. Heat is never static. It is made moment by moment quietly inside you. Long before words like metabolism existed, people understood this in a practical way. Your body is not a passive thing lying in the cold. It is an engine, and tonight it must idle carefully. You shift one shoulder just a fraction and feel warmth bloom where muscle tightens briefly. Movement creates heat, but too much invites sweat, and sweat is danger waiting for stillness. Ancient people learned to move in small doses, a flex here, a stretch there, just enough to remind the blood to keep flowing. You curl your spine, slightly rounding inward. This posture is not accidental. Rounded bodies expose less surface area. Less surface means less heat lost. You feel the difference immediately, a subtle easing of chill along your back. This is why crouching, squatting and curling appear so often in ancient depictions of rest. You think about how people trained their bodies without knowing they were training. Daily life involved walking, lifting, squatting, carrying. Muscles stayed active, circulation strong. Strong circulation meant better heat distribution at night. Excavated skeletal remains often show robust muscle attachments, especially in cold climate populations. Their bodies were shaped by necessity. Here is a small, easily missed detail. People often slept with limbs tucked beneath them, sitting or half reclining rather than fully stretched out. This reduced exposure and allowed heat from the core to warm the legs and feet. You experiment now, drawing one foot under your thigh. The cold recedes slightly. Breathing plays a role too. Slow breathing conserves energy. Rapid breathing cools the body faster. You notice how your breath has naturally slowed in the warmth of the group. Nose breathing warms air before it reaches the lungs. Mouth breathing does the opposite. Children were often corrected gently if they slept with mouths open in cold conditions. Comfort was taught. Some ancient groups practiced gentle rocking or swaying while settling into sleep, especially during the extreme cold. The movement was minimal, almost meditative. It generated warmth without causing perspiration. Whether this was intentional technique or comforting habit is not fully settled, but the effect is real. You become aware of your heartbeat. Steady, calm, panic spikes heat loss. Fear tightens. Muscles burns, energy leads to exhaustion. Stories, rituals, and routines helped keep minds calm before sleep. Calm minds make efficient bodies. You feel the warmth of others around you again. Their bodies contribute to the shared heat, but they also influence your own. Humans mirror each other unconsciously. When others relax, you relax. When they still, you still. The group becomes a single thermal system. There is some uncertainty about how much ancient people understood these bodily processes consciously. Some researchers argue that language around heat and cold existed early. Others suggest knowledge remained mostly embodied rather than spoken. Either way, the body remembered even if the mouth never explained. You adjust your hands, again tucking them close to your stomach. Blood stays near the core when it's cold. This protects vital organs but leaves fingers vulnerable. Keeping hands close allows warmth to spread back outward gradually. It feels instinctive because it is. Your muscles soften further. Heat builds slowly, quietly. Not enough to sweat, just enough to maintain. You're not trying to be warm. You're trying not to be cold. That difference matters. Outside, the temperature may drop further before dawn. Inside, your body compensates as long as fuel remains. This is why food matters, though you will think about that more later. For now, the engine hums softly. You drift again, aware that survival tonight depends as much on restraint as action. Knowing when not to move, when not to stretch, when to let stillness do the work. And as sleep deepens, you trust your body to do what it has done for countless nights across human history. Generate warmth, share it, hold it, quietly, patiently until light returns. You wake again with a slow awareness that warmth does not only come from outside, There is a deeper heat one that begins low in the body and spreads outward, steady and dependable. Food, you have learned, is not just fuel for movement, it is fuel for the night. Your stomach feels settled heavy in a reassuring way. That is no accident. Long before anyone spoke about calories, people noticed that certain foods made the cold easier to bear. Meals eaten before nightfall were chosen carefully, not for taste alone, but for staying power. Fat in particular mattered. It burned slowly, releasing heat over hours instead of minutes. Archaeological finds from cold climate sites often show a heavier reliance on animal fat and marrow during winter months. Bones were cracked deliberately, sometimes painstakingly, to access the richest parts. This was not desperation, it was planning. You feel the result now as a gentle warmth that seems to glow from within. You remember the way the meal was eaten earlier. Not rushed, not excessive. Overeating could make you sluggish or nauseous, which was dangerous in cold conditions. Undereating left you shivering by midnight. Balance again. Always balance. There is a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the heat you feel now was stored hours ago. Digestion itself produces warmth. The body works to break down food, and that work generates heat. You notice how your core feels warmer than your limbs. This is intentional. The body protects what matters most. Here is an overlooked practice that surprises many people. Some groups save their fattiest portions specifically for evening, even if hunger pressed earlier in the day. They understood that timing mattered. A rich meal too early burned off before night. Too late and digestion interfered with rest. Evening meals were carefully placed between labour and sleep. How widespread this practice was is still uncertain. Some evidence suggests it varied by region and season. In harsher climates, evening meals appear more substantial. In milder ones, people relied more on clothing and shelter. Adaptation shaped diet as much as landscape did. You shift slightly and feel the warmth hold steady. This is different from the quick heat of movement. This is slow, reliable. Fat and protein digest gradually, feeding the body through the longest hours of darkness. Sugars, when available, offered quick energy but burned fast. Rare treats, not staples. You think about how food was prepared. Raw fat can be difficult to digest. Cooking helps, but fireplaces were not always present. Some fats were rendered earlier and stored. Others were eaten raw, especially in colder regions where preservation mattered more than preference. The body adapted. Taste followed necessity. There is a strange but telling detail recorded in some oral traditions. People believed certain foods made the body brave against cold. While framed spiritually, the choice is often aligned with high energy content. Belief reinforced behavior that it worked. Your breath fogs softly in front of your face, but it feels less sharp now. Internal warmth softens the edge of the air you inhale. You pull your coverings closer and let digestion do its quiet work. Food sharing mattered too. No one hoarded warmth alone. Groups that survived distributed fat carefully, often prioritizing those most vulnerable. Children, elders, pregnant individuals. This was not charity. It was survival math. Losing them weakened everyone. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about how often food scarcity disrupted these patterns. Some winters were lean. In those times, people relied more heavily on other strategies. But when food was available, it was used wisely. You think about the sound of eating earlier. Quiet chewing, minimal waste, every scrap mattered. Even stomach contents of prey were sometimes consumed for nutrients. Nothing that could generate heat was ignored lightly. Your body shifts again, a small adjustment, and the warmth follows. This is the internal fire that replaces the fireplace. Invisible, portable, dependent on foresight. You feel a faint drowsiness settle in. Digestion encourages rest. The body wants you still while it works. Stillness conserves heat. Everything aligns toward the same goal. As sleep deepens, you realize that surviving the coldest nights was never about one solution. It was layers. Shelter outside, clothing around you, bodies beside you. and food within you burning slowly, faithfully through the dark. You let that warmth carry you back towards sleep, trusting that what you ate hours ago is still working for you now, quietly keeping the cold at bay from the inside out. You sense time differently now. Night stretches not in hours, but in cycles of breath, warmth, and stillness. Eating earlier has shifted something inside you, and you notice how the cold presses less insistently against your ribs. The warmth from digestion lingers slow and steady, like embers hidden deep under ash. People long ago noticed this effect without needing to name it. They learned that when you eat matters almost as much as what you eat. Meals too early leave you cold before dawn. Meals too late keep the body busy when it should be resting. Somewhere between work and sleep sits the ideal moment, and through trial and memory it became part of the rhythm of evening. You remember how the group ate together earlier, not hurried, not loud. There was a sense of timing, as if everyone understood the night ahead demanded preparation. Meat was shared carefully. Fat passed hand to hand. No one lingered over the food longer than necessary. Energy conserved even while being taken in. You feel your stomach settle further as you lie still. The body works more efficiently when calm. Stress interferes with digestion, and poor digestion means less heat. This is one reason evenings were often quieter. Stories softened, movement slowed. The body was given permission to focus inward. In some places, people preferred to eat just before settling down. In others, they waited until the last light faded. The difference often depended on climate and routine. In regions where dawn came brutally cold, eating later made sense. Where cold lingered all day, spacing food differently worked better. There was no universal rule, only adjustment. You shift slightly and feel no rush of chill. That tells you the timing was right. Heat still spreads from your core outward enough to keep your hands comfortable when tucked close. This is not the warmth of movement or shelter. This is sustained internal effort. There is a curious detail that emerges from reconstructed daily cycles. Some groups consumed small amounts of food during brief awakenings at night, especially during extreme cold. A bite of fat, a sip of broth if available, just enough to reignite warmth without fully waking the body. Whether this was common or exceptional remains unclear, but the idea fits the logic of survival. You think about how food was stored for this purpose. Fat does not spoil easily in cold. Dried meat lasts. These foods were portable warmth carried not in pockets but in memory. Knowing when to save them mattered. You listen to the breathing around you again, slow, even. No one is restless. That suggests everyone is warm enough. Hunger makes sleep shallow. Tonight's sleep deepens. Your own thoughts slow as digestion continues its quiet work. The body knows what to do. Blood stays near the core. Heat spreads just enough. No waste, no excess. You remember hearing that certain foods were avoided before sleep. Lean meat burns fast. Plant foods, when available, digested differently. In cold seasons, diets shifted almost entirely toward animal sources. Not out of preference, but because warmth followed function. The cold outside may be reaching its lowest point now. You feel it in the way the shelter creaks slightly, materials tightening. Inside the warmth holds, not growing, not fading, holding. You curl inward again, satisfied that everything is aligned. Shelter blocking wind, clothing trapping air, bodies sharing heat, food fueling the core, each piece supports the others. Remove one and the night becomes harder. Your breathing slows further. The body likes this state. Still, fed, warm enough. This is when sleep deepens naturally without effort. As you drift, you realize that eating for warmth was never indulgence. It was precision, knowing exactly when to take in energy so it could protect you hours later when the cold was most dangerous and movement least desirable. And with that understanding resting quietly in your mind, you let sleep carry you onward, confident that the warmth within will last until the faintest hint of morning light begins to soften the cold. You feel your hand brush against something solid near your hip, small and familiar. Even half asleep, you recognize it by touch. A simple object shaped by use more than design. Tools like this rarely draw attention, but on nights like this they quietly tip the balance between cold endured and cold defeated. Ancient people surrounded themselves with items that did not look like insulation at first glance. A wooden bowl turned upside down to block a draft, a stone placed near the feet to anchor coverings in place, even a bundle of reeds tied just tight enough to hold shape. None of these were dramatic inventions. They were small solutions discovered through repetition. You remember how earlier someone adjusted a low barrier near the shelter entrance, a row of stones, nothing fancy, just enough to disrupt airflow along the ground. Cold air moves like water flowing low and fast. Interrupting that flow matters. You feel the difference now. Your ankles stay warmer. That alone helps the whole body relax. Archaeological sites often reveal clusters of everyday objects positioned deliberately around sleeping areas. Tools not for hunting or cutting but for shaping space. Scrapers, clubs, baskets, even sled parts sometimes appear where people slept. Their placement suggests they doubled as wind blocks or anchors. Objects earn second lives at night. You shift again and pull a flat piece of bark closer to your side. It acts as a shield, reflecting a bit of warmth back toward you. Hard surfaces can redirect heat, especially when placed close. This is not obvious until you feel it working. A subtle change, less chill on one side, you keep it there. There is a quiet ingenuity in using what is already at hand. No extra effort, no extra weight carried, just awareness. People learned which items helped and which were useless. Knowledge accumulated, slowly shaped by countless nights like this one. One unexpected habit emerges from experimental reconstructions. People sometimes slept with tools tucked close, not only for security, but because solid objects retain heat absorbed during the day. A stone warmed by sunlight holds that warmth for hours. Pressed near the body, it releases it slowly. You imagine resting your feet against such a stone, feeling the faint comfort it provides. How intentional this practice was remains open to interpretation. Some believe it was accidental. Others point out that repeated patterns suggest choice. Either way, the effect mattered. You hear a faint clink as someone nearby shifts a tool touching another. The sound is soft, familiar. Tools were extensions of the body. Keeping them close at night made sense. Predators aside, tools were valuable. Losing them meant losing efficiency tomorrow. Keeping them warm also prevented brittleness in extreme cold, especially for items made from bone or wood. You think about containers, bags made from hide or woven fibers, filled with grasses, feathers, or spare clothing. These bundles became movable insulation, placed where drafts crept in, adjusted through the night as needed. Simple, effective. There is evidence that some groups use reflective surfaces in subtle ways. Polished bone, smooth stone, placed near the face or chest, these surfaces could redirect radiant heat back toward the body. Not enough to feel hot, but enough to matter over hours. You picture the soft glow of moonlight reflecting faintly off such a surface doing double duty. You adjust your posture and feel the ground tool beneath your knee shift slightly. It props you just enough to keep pressure off a colder patch of earth. Small adjustments like this prevent heat loss through conduction. You settle more comfortably and the chill fades. The night remains quiet. Tools lie where they need to be. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ornamental. Each item earns its place through usefulness. You think briefly about how children learn this, watching adults place objects deliberately before sleep, copying without explanation, learning which things to grab when cold crept in. Knowledge passed through hands, not words. There is no single list of these tools. They varied by region, by season, by available materials, but the principle stayed the same. Shape the space, interrupt the cold, use weight and placement to your advantage. You feel the covering settle again, anchored by a stone near the edge. No flapping, no draft sneaking in. The shelter grows quieter, more still. As sleep deepens, you realize that survival often hides in the unremarkable. Not in grand structures or bold actions, but in the careful placement of a bowl, a stick, a stone. tools that do not shout their purpose but whisper it through warmth. You let your hand rest near that familiar object by your side, comforted by its presence. It is doing its job without asking for attention. And with that quiet assistance, you drift back towards sleep, wrapped not just in hides and bodies, but in accumulated human cleverness, patiently holding the cold at bay. You feel it before you hear it. A subtle pressure on your skin. The wind has shifted again. Wind is not cold by itself, but it steals warmth faster than anything else. Long ago, people learned to fear moving air more than falling snow. Snow settles, wind hunts. You turn your face, slightly instinct guiding you. Even a small change in angle reduces exposure. Wind strips heat by replacing the warm air around your body with cold air again and again. Blocking that movement is more effective than adding layers. You feel grateful now for every barrier placed earlier. Outside the shelter, the wind slides along the ground low and persistent. Inside it breaks and slows. This is not accidental. Shelters were placed with wind in mind first and everything else second. Sites found in open terrain often sit behind natural rises, tree lines, or rock outcrops. People chose locations that worked with the land rather than against it. You remember how earlier someone stacked brush along the windward side? Not to block sark snow, but to disrupt airflow. Wind loses strength when forced through uneven material. Twigs, grasses, branches. Chaos slows it down. You feel the result now as the air inside remains still. Cold wind sounds different from warm wind, sharper, whistling instead of sighing. Ancient people learned to read these sounds. A rising pitch meant exposure. A muffled hush meant safety. You listen carefully. Tonight sounds contained. You pull the covering tighter along the side facing the wind. Not thicker, just better sealed. Sealing matters more. Gaps invite airflow. Even small openings can drain warmth surprisingly fast. You feel the chill ease as the edge settles properly. In some regions, people built low-wind fences that curved around sleeping areas. These were not walls in the usual sense. They were guides redirecting air away rather than stopping it out to moat. Air forced to change direction loses energy. This principle appears again and again in how cold climates are navigated. There is an interesting detail seen in reconstructed camps. Windward siders often show heavier wear, more reinforcement, more repairs. Leeward sides remain lighter, more open. The shelter tells a story of prevailing winds even after centuries. You imagine reading that story with your hands feeling thicker, layers where protection mattered most. Your ears remain alert even as your body relaxes. Wind carries sound. It can mask footsteps or announce them. Too much wind is dangerous for different reasons. Too little can mean a sudden temperature drop. Balance again, always balance. You shift slightly and feel no rush of cold. That tells you the barriers are holding. The wind passes overhead, diverted, diluted. Inside, the air stays still enough to let warmth linger. People sometimes use their own bodies as wind blocks. Those on the outer edge of a group slept with backs to the wind. Those inside stayed warmer. Positions changed through the night as people stirred. Cooperation happened without words. There is some uncertainty about how formal these arrangements were. In some groups, roles may have been assigned. In others, people adjusted naturally. Cold teaches quickly. Those who ignored it did not repeat the mistake often. You think about vegetation. Evergreen branches in particular were favoured for wind blocking. Dense needles disrupt airflow effectively. Even today, forests reduce wind speed dramatically. People noticed this long before measuring tools existed. You feel the shelter creak softly as the wind presses against it, then relaxes. The structure flexes instead of resisting. Rigid walls crack. Flexible ones survive. This is why many early shelters used materials that bent rather than broke. Your breathing slows again as the wind fades into the background. The cold remains, but it is no longer aggressive. That's the goal. Not to eliminate cold, but to tame it. As sleep pulls you deeper, you realize that wind was never just weather. It was an opponent to be studied, anticipated, redirected. And tonight, thanks to careful choices made before darkness fell, it passes by without finding you. Your breath becomes a small cloud again, blooming and fading in the dim space near your face. You notice it now because it has changed. The air feels heavier, softer, carrying moisture that was not there earlier. Breath does that. Over hours it leaves a trace behind, invisible but powerful. You turn your head, slightly careful not to disturb anyone. Too much moisture is trouble. It clings to surfaces, cools them, and returns as dampness where you least want it. Ancient people learned this lesson through mornings that began with stiff coverings and frozen hair. Tonight, you stay ahead of it. The shelter responds quietly. There is a small opening above, not large enough to invite wind, but enough to let warm, wet air drift upward and out. You cannot see it clearly, but you feel the effect. Your breath does not linger as long. The air clears itself slowly. Condensation is sneaky. It forms where warm breath meets cold surfaces. That is why you avoid breathing directly into coverings. You angle your face so each exhale slips past the edge and into open space. This habit becomes automatic over time, learned through discomfort rather than instruction. You remember how earlier the coverings were arranged with slight gaps between layers. Not floors but channels. Moisture moves upward when given a path. Trapped moisture freezes. Escaped moisture disappears. You appreciate the quiet intelligence of that design. Inside the shelter, surfaces feel dry to the touch. That dryness is protection. Wet materials steal heat far faster than dry ones. Even thick layers fail when soaked. This is why nights following snowmelt or freezing rain were especially dangerous. Tonight the air remains cooperative. There is a faint sound above you, almost like whispering. Ice crystals forming and shifting as warm air escapes. You imagine them catching light briefly before falling away. Small signs that the shelter is breathing along with you. Some groups used absorbent materials near sleeping areas. Moss-dried grasses, even feathers. These soaked up moisture before it could spread. In the morning they could be dried again. You imagine reaching for such a bundle, now tucking it near your mouth to catch stray breath. You shift your shoulders slightly and feel no chill. That tells you moisture has not settled where you lie. The layers remain effective. Still air stays trapped. Warmth holds. Your hair brushes your cheek, dry and stiff with cold. Wet hair would steal warmth relentlessly. That is why people often cover their heads completely at night, leaving only the face exposed. Head coverings were adjusted carefully to avoid trapping breath inside. You think about frost forming on eyelashes in extreme cold. It looks delicate, almost beautiful, but it signals danger. Frozen breath means moisture is freezing on contact. Nights like those required even more careful venting. People learn to read these signs quickly. The air smells clean again, a sign that moisture is leaving. You inhale slowly, feeling the coolness without the bite. The balance holds. Sleep pulls at you heavier now. Your body relaxes deeper when it senses dryness. Muscles unclench. Shivering stays away. The night becomes quieter. You realize that warmth alone is not enough. Dry warmth is the goal. Dry breath. Dry layers. Dry shelter. Every decision bends toward that outcome. As you drift further, your breathing stays slow and angled just right. Habit shaped by countless nights before this one. The shelter breathes with you. Moisture slips away. Cold waits, albeit unable to take advantage. And wrapped in that careful balance of warmth and dryness, you sink into deeper sleep, trusting the air itself to carry your breath away and leave you undisturbed until morning. You stir slightly and sense the careful arrangement around you, one that places certain bodies closer to the center than others. This is not random, it never was. Cold forces choices, and those choices reveal what a group values most when survival is on the line. Near you, a smaller form sleeps deeply, breath soft and uneven in the way only children breathe. Their body gives off less heat, loses it faster. That is why they are placed here, surrounded on all sides. Not smothered, just protected. You feel the warmth curve inward, a quiet shelter made of people instead of walls. Elders rest nearby as well. Their breathing is slower, more fragile. They do not generate heat as easily, and once chilled they recover slowly. Nights like this are hardest for them. Long ago people noticed that when elders survived, winter knowledge survived with them. Paths remembered, seasons predicted, stories retained. Keeping them warm was practical wisdom. You adjust slightly to make more space without breaking the warmth. These movements are subtle, almost unconscious. Cold teaches sensitivity. Too much movement breaks the shared heat. Too little leaves someone exposed. Balance again felt rather than discussed. There are traces of this pattern in the ground at old camps. Larger impressions clustered tightly, smaller ones tucked inside. The arrangement shifts through time and place, but the logic repeats. Bodies arranged like embers, hottest in the centered cooler toward the edges. You think about how this order formed. No commands shouted, no rules carved. Children learned by being placed. Elders learned by being invited inward. Everyone learned by waking up warm or waking up cold. There is a small, easily missed habit some groups practiced. Extra layers were placed selectively, not evenly. Thicker hides went to those who needed them most. Others accepted thinner coverings without complaint. Warmth was shared where it mattered most. You feel a hand brush your arm briefly, then settle. Someone adjusting, making sure you're still covered. This happens without words, a kind of nighttime maintenance. Each person responsible not only for themselves, but for the warmth of the whole. You notice how the group breathes together. Again, the sound soft and steady. The combined warmth creates a more stable environment, making it easier for the most vulnerable to sleep through the night. Sleep itself conserves energy. Rested bodies resist cold better. There were times when this balance failed. When food ran low, when sickness spread. Those winters left marks not just on bodies but on memory. The next season arrangements shifted. Extra care given sooner, lessons carried forward quietly. You imagine a parent waking briefly to check a child's hands feeling for warmth. A simple test. Cold fingers meant adjustment was needed, more layers, a closer embrace. This vigilance saved lives without ceremony. Your own body relaxes as you feel the group settle again. The warmth feels even now distributed carefully. No one shivers. That is success. You realize that cold shaped social behavior as much as tools or shelter. It taught cooperation without speeches. It rewarded awareness. It punished neglect quickly and without mercy. As your thoughts slow, you understand that these nighttime arrangements were not just about surviving the coldest hours. They were about ensuring the group woke intact, knowledge preserved, futures possible, and with that quiet understanding you sink back into sleep, held not just by warmth, but by a system of care refined over generations, gently resisting the cold until morning returns. The night feels quieter now, but not empty. Sound behaves differently in the cold, and you have learned to listen for what is missing as much as for what remains. Silence can mean safety. It can also mean danger. The difference lies in texture, in how the quiet sits against your ears. You notice that even small sounds carry far. A cough, a shift of fabric, the faint scrape of something moving across snow. Cold air sharpens noise, allowing it to travel with little resistance. Long ago people learned this by waking too late. Now you listen without effort, aware even in rest. The shelter softens sound inside. The wind becomes a low murmur rather than a whistle. Breathing blends into a shared rhythm. This muffling is intentional. Materials chosen for walls and coverings do not just block cold, they absorb noise. Bark hides grasses, all of them dull, sharp sounds that might otherwise echo outward. You think about how people avoided unnecessary noise at night. Tools were placed carefully, loose items secured. Even children were taught early that nighttime was different. Quiet conserved warmth. Quiet avoided attention. Quiet made listening possible. Outside animals moved differently in cold. Some become bold driven by hunger, others retreat entirely. The absence of certain sounds tells you as much as their presence. No insects, few birds, just the occasional distant call that fades quickly into stillness. You remember stories told earlier in the evening? Not loud tales, but low voices close together. Stories served more than one purpose. They kept minds calm. They provided gentle warmth through shared breath. They also ended early. Talking too long cooled the body and dried the throat. Everything had its time. There is a faint crack somewhere beyond the shelter. Ice shifting. Not close enough to worry. You register it and let it pass. This kind of sound is familiar. It belongs to the night itself. In some places, people use sound deliberately. Small markers placed where they would rattle or knock if wind or animals disturbed them. Not alarms exactly, but indicators. A warning without the need for constant watching. You imagine a bundle of bone or shell tied loosely ready to speak only if needed. Sleep remains light enough that you could wake quickly. This is not fear, it is readiness. Cold sleep is different from warm sleep. The body rests, but awareness lingers just below the surface. You feel how stillness deepens warmth. Every unnecessary movement sends sound into the night and heat into the air, so you remain quiet even in thought. The mind slows, the body follows. The quiet around you is not absolute, it is layered. Wind far away, breath nearby, the faint settling of materials as temperatures shift. These sounds reassure you. They mean the shelter is holding, the group is alive. You notice how silence changes before dawn. It thickens. The world seems to pause. This is often the coldest moment. Without sun or wind, heat drains slowly but steadily. People learn to expect this to prepare for it by resting deeply through the darkest hours. You tuck your chin slightly and listen again. No new sounds. That is good. No sudden rush of air. No frantic movement. Everything remains balanced. There is something calming about this controlled quiet. It wraps around you like another layer. Sound, when managed well, becomes part of warmth. As sleep pulls you deeper, the night continues its watch. You remain within it, listening without effort, resting without fully letting go. And in that gentle awareness you drift onward, carried by quiet that protects as much as it soothes. You notice movement beyond the shelter, not close enough to worry, but close enough to register. An animal passing through the night, following a path older than memory. Humans watched animals carefully in cold places, not out of curiosity, but because survival leaves clues in fur and feather. You think about how creatures rest when temperatures drop. Many curl tightly, hiding noses beneath tails. Others burrow into snow or earth, using the ground as insulation. Long ago, people paid attention to this. They noticed which animals survived the longest nights and how they arranged their bodies to do it. You feel the shelter around you again and realize how much it resembles a nest. Low, enclosed, lined with soft material. This is not coincidence. Humans copied what worked. Burrows inspired pits. Nests inspired bedding. The line between observation and invention was thin. You remember watching animals earlier in the season, how they chose resting spots away from wind, how they favoured dense brush or rock over open ground. Those choices guided where people stopped to sleep. The land offered hints if you knew how to look. Some animals store warmth in unexpected ways, thick fat beneath skin, hollow fur that traps air, dense feathers layered just right. People could not grow fur, but they could mimic its structure. Layers over layers, air held gently in place. You feel that mimicry now in the way your coverings loft slightly above your body. You adjust your position, tucking your face closer to your chest just as foxes do. Breath warms the space briefly before escaping. The habit feels natural, as if learned long ago. Maybe it was. Animals also teach restraint. They do not move unless necessary. Energy saved is warmth preserved. You follow that lesson, now staying still even when a small itch flickers across your shoulder. You let it pass. Warmth matters more. You think about how animals sense weather shifts, changes in pressure, subtle smells, The feel of air on skin in. People learn to trust similar signals. A restless herd, birds moving earlier than expected. These signs shape decisions about shelter and timing. The animal outside moves on, its presence fades into the night. You feel calmer knowing the patterns hold. Predators hunt when desperate. Tonight does not feel desperate. You listen again to the breathing around you. Steady. Comfortable. The group sleeps like a single creature, sharing warmth the way animals huddle in winter. This closeness is not weakness. It is adaptation. You feel your muscles soften further. The cold remains, but it is no longer sharp. It has been dulled by the layers, bodies, and borrowed lessons from the natural world. As sleep deepens, you realize that humans survived cold nights not by separating themselves from nature, but by paying close attention to it, watching, copying, adjusting. And wrapped in that quiet inheritance, you drift onward, breathing slowly, body curled just right, sharing the night the way countless creatures have always done. You sense a shift that is not physical at first, but emotional. A gentle settling that comes from familiarity. Rituals live here in the space between action and comfort. Not dramatic ceremonies, just repeated behaviors that signal safety. The kind that tell your body it's time to rest, even when the cold waits patiently outside. Earlier, before sleep fully claimed the group, there were small actions carried out in the same order they always are. Coverings straightened, openings checked, hands brushed across the ground as if confirming it was still there. These gestures are not strictly necessary every night, but they matter. Repetition calms the mind, and a calm mind wastes less heat. You remember a quiet murmur that passed through the group before silence took over. Not a prayer exactly, not a command. More like a shared acknowledgement that the night had begun. Words spoken softly carry warmth too, not in temperature but in reassurance. Reassurance relaxes muscles. Relaxed muscles conserve energy. You notice how the same people always seem to handle the same tasks. One checks the windward side, another adjusts bedding near the children. Someone else listens, just listens for changes in the night. Roles settle naturally over time, shaped by temperament as much as skill. Cold encourages efficiency, not hierarchy. There is something comforting in knowing what comes next. Even when the night is harsh, predictability softens it. You feel your breathing slow as your body recognizes the pattern. This is the part where stillness deepens, where the world narrows to warmth, breath, and faint sound. Some habits look spiritual on the surface, a touch to the ground, glance at the sky, a pause before lying down, but beneath that they often serve practical purposes. Feeling the earth tells you if moisture has crept in. Looking up checks cloud cover. Pausing allows the body to cool slightly after movement preventing sweat. You adjust your position again, mirroring those around you. Synchrony happens without instruction. When one person settles, others follow. The group moves towards a rest together, like a tide receding slowly. You think about how children learn these rituals without explanation. They imitate, they feel the effect. Warm nights follow careful routines, cold ones follow neglect. The lesson teaches itself. There is a gentle sense of belonging in these shared actions. You are part of something larger than your own comfort. Everyone depends on everyone else doing their part, however small. This trust makes sleep possible even when conditions are unforgiving. The night grows deeper. The ritual has done its work. Anxiety fades, thoughts slow, the body accepts the stillness. As you drift closer to sleep, you realize that these small repeated acts are as important as any shelter or clothing. They shape behavior, they prepare the body, they turn survival into habit. And held within that quiet routine, you rest, letting the familiar sequence carry you safely through the coldest hours just as it has done for countless nights before. Your mind drifts into stories without effort, the kind that rise naturally when the body is warm enough to let thoughts wander. Cold nights have always shaped imagination. When the dark presses close and the wind speaks in unfamiliar tones, the mind fills the gaps with meaning. You remember tales shared on other nights spoken softly so breath would not be wasted. Stories about shadows moving across snowfields. About voices carried by the wind. about figures that wandered between camps when the cold grew especially deep. These stories were not meant to terrify. They were meant to explain the unease that cold creates. Fear sharpens attention. Attention keeps you alive. That connection was understood long before anyone named it. When a story made you pause, listen harder, pull your coverings tighter, it served a purpose. You feel that now as a faint alertness hums beneath your drowsiness. The cold itself feels alive sometimes. It creeps, it presses, it waits. Giving it a personality made it easier to respect. Easier to remember its rules. Do not expose skin too long, do not wander alone, do not ignore the signs. Stories carried these lessons without instruction. You picture the way elders spoke of the night as something to negotiate with, not conquer. The cold was a presence that demanded courtesy. Carelessness angered it. Preparation appeased it. These ideas shaped behaviour even when people knew deep down that the cold followed no emotions. There is a strange comfort in believing the night is watching. It keeps you still. It keeps you quiet. It encourages closeness, all things that help you survive until morning. Some stories focused on transformation, people who became animals to endure winter, bears sleeping through the worst of it, foxes wrapped in their own tails. These images lingered in the mind-guiding posture and patience. You curl a little tighter without thinking, echoing the lesson. You notice how your thoughts slow looping gently around familiar images. Stories become softer as sleep approaches, sharp edges fade. What remains is atmosphere, snow falling endlessly, a fireless camp glowing faintly with shared warmth, breath rising like smoke. The cold has a sound in stories too, a low hum, a whisper, a warning. You listen now and hear only the wind moving past, dulled by shelter and care. The story tonight is a calm one where preparation holds. You feel your body relax further, the mind satisfied that it understands what surrounds it. Stories give shape to uncertainty. Once shaped, it is less frightening. As sleep deepens, the images blur, figures fade. The night becomes simply night again. Cold, yes, but familiar. Managed, held at a distance by layers of knowledge and habit. And wrapped in that quiet mythology, you drift onward, letting old stories soften the edges of the dark, carrying you gently through the longest hours until morning returns. You wake again, but this time not because of cold, it is a gentle interruption, a sense of warmth appearing briefly and then fading. Not from fire, from something smaller, easier to miss. Temporary warmth has its own quiet language. Earlier in the night, you remember someone pressing a warmed object near the centre of the group, not hot, just not frozen. It might have been a stone kept close to the body after the last light of day. It might have been a bundle of fat wrapped tightly to hold its temperature a little longer. Whatever it was, the warmth moved, slowly shared without comment. You feel a trace of it now near your feet, a softness in the cold, like a memory lingering after touch. Temporary heat does not last long, but it does not need to. It bridges moments, it eases transitions, it helps the body settle back into balance. People learn to recognize these brief opportunities, a sun-warmed surface late in the day, a body that had just been moving, a container that held warmth for a short while. These were not relied upon, but they were welcomed, used carefully, never wasted. You think about how warmth transfers best through contact. Air loses it quickly, solid things hold it longer. Pressed close, they share it slowly. You tuck your feet slightly closer to your body, catching what remains. There is a small habit you recall seeing earlier. Someone rubbing their hands together, then placing them on another person's back before settling down. Not enough to heat, just enough to comfort. Heat passed briefly, then bodies took over. The cold outside remains steady. Inside, these small exchanges soften its edge. They do not replace the larger systems of shelter and clothing, but they support them. Like small stones placed under a heavy structure, they matter in quiet ways. You notice how these moments of warmth often arrive just before deeper sleep. The body relaxes, accepts the help, then maintains temperature on its own again. Temporary heat becomes a signal, It tells the body it is safe to let go. You shift slightly and feel the warmth dissipate completely. That is fine. It did its job. No disappointment, no chasing it. Ancient nights taught acceptance. Some warmth stays, some passes. You work with what remains. Your breathing slows again. The group settles. No one seeks more warmth now. Everything's balanced again. As sleep deepens, you understand that surviving without fireplaces did not mean enduring unbroken cold. It meant weaving moments of warmth into the night wherever they could be found and letting them fade naturally without panic. And with that understanding resting quietly in your body, you drift onward, content with the knowledge that even fleeting warmth can carry you safely through the dark. You wake with a faint awareness of dampness, not enough to alarm you, just enough to remind you why restraint matters. Sweat is subtle. It creeps in quietly when effort runs too high or layers are misjudged. In cold places, sweat is not relief. It is a warning. Earlier, you remember slowing yourself deliberately as the evening ended. No rushing, no heavy lifting once the sun dipped low. People learned this lesson early. Hard work late in the day felt productive, but it punished you later. Moisture trapped near the skin steals heat with ruthless efficiency once movement stops. You feel your clothing now. Dry. That is good. Dry means your choice is held. You adjust a layer near your shoulder, loosening it just enough to release lingering warmth without letting cold rush in. Venting is as important as covering. The balance is delicate. You think about how people judged effort by feel rather than numbers. A warming back meant slow down. A damp neck meant stop. These signals became second nature. Ignoring them meant shivering later long after the work was done. There is a memory of someone removing a layer before sleep, even though the night was cold. It seemed counterintuitive, but it worked. Trapped heat without airflow breeds moisture. A slightly cooler body that stays dry lasts longer than a warmer one that turns damp. You press your palm against your chest and feel only warmth, no slickness. Good. The body is steady. Blood flows calmly. Heat remains where it should. You notice how the group rests now. No one fidgets, no restless movements that might generate sweat. Stillness is intentional. Even dreams seem quieter. Moisture management shaped daily rhythms. Tasks were timed. Travel paced, rest periods planned. None of this was written down. It lived in habit, reinforced by nights that went badly when lessons were ignored. You think about drying rituals in the morning. Clothes shaken, skins aired, bedding spread briefly to release moisture. These actions mattered as much as evening preparation. Dryness today meant warmth tonight. The air inside the shelter feels balanced. Not stale, not damp. Your breath moves through it without lingering. That tells you venting still works. You curl slightly inward again, content that sweat has been avoided. The cold remains outside, unable to exploit dampness. As sleep deepens, you understand that warmth is not about piling on more. It is about knowing when to stop, when to slow, when to let the body cool just enough to stay dry. And with that quiet discipline guiding you even in rest, you drift onward, confident that dryness will protect you through the longest hours of the night. You picture movement in the dark, not hurried, not reckless, but deliberate. Travelling at night in cold places was never preferred, yet sometimes it was unavoidable. When storms threatened or food ran low, people learned how to move without letting the cold claim them. You imagine the feel of frozen ground beneath careful steps, each foot placed with attention. No stomping, no wasted motion. Movement generates heat, but it also invites sweat. Those who travelled at night learned to walk just fast enough to stay warm, just slow enough to stay dry. You sense how direction mattered. Moving with the wind cooled you faster. Moving across it demanded more effort. People chose paths that balanced both. Slight rises instead of deep valleys. Tree lines instead of open flats. The land offered protection if you listened. You think about how packs were adjusted before moving. Straps loosened, loads redistributed, pressure points reduced. Pain causes tension. Tension wastes energy. Small adjustments made long nights possible. There is a quiet rhythm to night travel. Step, pause, listen, breathe. The body stays alert but not anxious. Eyes scan shadows, ears track sound. The cold sharpens attention without overwhelming it. You imagine stopping briefly, not to rest fully, but to let breath slow and moisture evaporate. Short pauses mattered more than long ones. Stopping too long let the cold seep in. Not stopping at all led to sweat. Balance again. When movement ended, shelter had to come quickly. Even a partial windbreak helped. Packs set down, layers adjusted, bodies regrouped, heat redistributed. Travelling alone was rare. Companionship multiplied safety. You think about how children were carried or guided. Extra care taken to keep them moving just enough. Elders moved at their own pace, supported without rush. The group moved together or not at all. As you imagine this slow night journey, you feel gratitude that tonight you are still. Movement is effort. Stillness is rest. Both have their place. You settle deeper into your coverings, letting the imagined motion fade. The cold outside remains steady, but you are no longer moving through it. You are waiting it out. And with that understanding, you rest knowing that whether moving or still survival always depended on listening to the body and the land, step by careful step, breath by steady breath. You sense memory working quietly in the background, the kind that does not rely on words or marks. Cold seasons return again and again, and each time they leave impressions that guide the next response. Even lying still, now wrapped in warmth, you feel those memories shaping the night. You think about how people remembered winters without writing anything down. Not dates or numbers, but sensations, the way the air felt just before the first deep freeze, the smell that came with early snow, the sound of ice forming on the water. These cues settled into the body, ready to surface when needed. Someone near you shifts and murmurs, half dreaming. Dreams often echo the season, running through snow, searching for shelter, finding warmth just in time. These dreams are not random. They rehearse survival, keeping lessons alive even in rest. You imagine elders speaking quietly at the edge of evening, recalling a winter-long past. Not as a story meant to entertain, but as a reminder. Last time the river froze this early, they say food ran short. Last time the wind came from that direction, shelters failed. These memories shape decisions without needing explanation. You feel how this knowledge lives in timing, when to stop travelling, when to add more bedding, when to eat more or less. The body recognises these moments almost before the mind does. That recognition is memory too. You think about how mistakes were remembered more strongly than successes. A night that went wrong stayed vivid, fingers numb, sleep broken by shivering. Those memories lingered, guiding future caution. Comfort once achieved faded quietly. Discomfort taught louder lessons. The shelter around you feels familiar, not just because you have been here tonight, but because it resembles others you have known. Shapes repeat, materials change, but the feeling remains. Safe enough, warm enough, memory recognizes that and relaxes the body. You notice how the group seems to settle at the same time, as if everyone senses the deepest part of night approaching. This timing is learned. Passed through experience. The coldest hour often comes just before dawn. People prepared for it without clocks, guided by instinct, sharpened through repetition. You pull your coverings slightly higher, not because you are cold yet, but because memory suggests it will help soon. Preparation arrives before discomfort. That is the advantage of remembering. As sleep deepens again, you realize that surviving cold nights without fireplaces depended as much on remembering as on building or wearing anything. Memory told people what worked, what failed, when to act. And wrapped in that quiet inheritance of lived experience, you rest trusting that what has been learned before will continue to protect you now, carrying you gently through the final hours of darkness. You wake with a strange sensation that is neither pain nor comfort. A dull numbness at the edge of awareness. This is how danger often begins in the cold. Not with drama, but with quiet signals that ask for attention before it is too late. You flex your fingers slowly inside their wrap. Sensation returns in stages. First pressure, then tingling, then warmth. That tells you everything you need to know. You caught it early. People learn to test their bodies this way without panic. Gentle movement, never sudden. Sudden heat hurts. Gradual return saves tissue. You think about how people recognized trouble long before they had names for it. Skin that turned pale and waxy, fingers that would not obey, toes that felt wooden instead of alive. These signs were learned through watching, through loss, through mornings that did not go as planned. Someone nearby shifts, rubbing their hands together slowly before tucking them back beneath layers. No alarm, no fuss, just correction. That calm response mattered. Panic wastes heat and time. Calm preserves both. You feel your cheeks, necks. A gentle touch. Warm enough. Good. Faces were checked often during the night, noses and ears especially. Exposed parts suffered first. Coverings were adjusted quietly sometimes without waking the person at all. There is a memory of someone once laughing at numbness, thinking it meant the cold was beaten. That laughter did not last. Stories like that lingered. They taught caution. Numbness is not victory. It is warning. You notice how the group remains attentive even in rest. People wake briefly, check themselves or others, then drift back. Sleep in the cold is layered with awareness, deep enough to rest, light enough to respond. You stretch one leg slightly, then settle again. Blood flows back, warmth follows. No lingering stiffness. You caught it in time. In harsher nights, people sometimes massaged cold limbs gently through layers, rather than exposing skin. Exposure could worsen damage. Keeping cold areas covered while warmth returned worked better. You remember seeing this done earlier, hands moving slowly, deliberately. You think about how children were taught these signs early, not with fear but with familiarity. Cold fingers meant come closer. Pale skin meant adjust. Lessons repeated until they became instinct. Your breathing steadies again as the sensation fades completely. The body adapts. The moment passes. As sleep returns, you understand that surviving without fireplaces required constant listening to the body, not heroic endurance, but attention. The cold spoke softly at first. Those who listened lived. And with that awareness settled quietly back into place, you drift onward, confident that even in sleep you will notice what matters. Just gently and greet the morning intact. You feel the night tilt slightly as if something small has gone wrong. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. A draft that was not there before. A faint coolness brushing your calf. These moments are familiar. Plans fail quietly. You open your eyes just enough to assess without fully waking. The shelter has shifted. Materials contract in the cold. Ties loosen. A corner lifts. It happens. What matters is how quickly it is addressed. You reach out slowly, fingers finding the edge of a covering that has slipped. You pull it back into place, anchoring it with a nearby object. The draft fades. Crisis ended before it could begin. Nights like this teach you to respond early. Someone nearby stirs as well. They sensed it too. A shared awareness ripples briefly, then settles. No words are exchanged. None are needed. You think about nights when things went worse. A sudden gust tearing through. A collapse of bedding. Rain freezing unexpectedly. Those nights demanded improvisation. People piled closer, added whatever material was available, used bodies as barriers. Adaptation mattered more than original design. You imagine scrambling briefly, heart pounding, then slowing deliberately. Panic makes mistakes. Calm finds solutions. Even in failure, there was a method. You adjust your position, again testing the air. Still, warm enough, the system has corrected itself. Shelters were never permanent solutions. They were temporary answers to changing conditions. Expecting them to fail made people ready. Flexibility was built into design and behavior alike. You remember someone once saying that a perfect shelter does not exist. Only one that can be fixed in the dark with cold hands. That idea shaped everything. Simple ties, redundant layers, nothing too complex to repair quickly. The group settles again, breathing evens out, the night continues. As sleep returns, you accept that survival never meant eliminating risk entirely. It meant staying alert enough to meet it when it appeared. Tonight you did, and with that quiet confidence you drift onward, knowing that even when plans falter, attention and cooperation carry you safely through. You feel how the cold shapes more than bodies and shelters. It shapes behavior. Rules exist here even if no one ever named them. Where you sleep, who lies closest, who moves first in the morning. Temperature decides these things quietly. You notice how space is negotiated without words. Someone larger stays nearer the edge. Someone smaller drifts inward. This happens naturally, shaped by countless nights of trial and correction. No one announces it. It simply works. You think about how authority feels different in the cold. Strength matters, but so does restraint. Those who move too much disturb warmth. Those who hoard space leave gaps. Cooperation earns trust. Cold makes fairness visible. Earlier in the evening, you remember how tasks were divided, not by status, but by suitability. Nimble hands adjusted ties. Strong backs stacked barriers. Attentive ears listened. Everyone contributed something that kept the night manageable. You feel how closeness does not mean chaos. Boundaries remain. People respect sleep. Accidental contact is brief, corrected gently. Alpha and consideration share the same space. Children learn these rules quickly, not through instruction but through consequence. A restless child feels colder. A still one sleeps better. The lesson teaches itself. You sense how the cold discourages excess. Loud voices, large gestures, unnecessary movement. All of it costs warmth. Over time, behavior becomes economical. Even emotions quiet down. Anger burns energy. Calm conserves it. You think about how disputes are rare at night. Daylight allows argument. Darkness demands cooperation. Cold leaves little room for pride. You feel the group settle into this shared understanding again. No one pushes, no one pulls away. The arrangement holds. As sleep deepens, you realize that temperature shapes societies as surely as geography. It rewarded those who could adapt socially as well as physically. And held within that quiet order, you drift onward, knowing that survival here depended not just on materials, but on how people treated one another when warmth was scarce. You imagine the land shifting beneath memory, different places demanding different answers to the same cold question. What works here would fail elsewhere. Survival was never copied whole, it was translated. You picture wide-open plains where wind never rests. There shelter crouches low pressed into earth, shaped to disappear rather than resist. You feel how nothing rises tall enough to catch the air. Everything bends, everything hides. Then your thoughts drift to forested regions. Trees break the wind, but snow piles deep. Shelters lift slightly off the ground, allowing melt to pass beneath instead of soaking in. Bedding grows thicker. Paths are cleared, carefully marked so no one wanders at night. You sense coastal cold next, damp, heavy, salt in the air. Here, dryness becomes the hardest task. Coverings change, venting matters more. People listen for the sound of water freezing and thawing, timing rest between shifts. In the far north, where cold is constant rather than seasonal, everything simplifies. Movement slow, diets grow dense, shelter becomes compact, almost intimate. You imagine how time stretches their nights long enough to feel endless, demanding patience above all else. You notice how bodies adapt too. Faces broaden, limbs feel shorter, closer to the core. Clothing mirrors this wrapping, tightly minimizing exposure. The cold leaves its signature everywhere. You realize that there was never a single ancient solution to cold nights. Each place taught its own lessons. Each group listened to their environment and responded in kind. As sleep deepens, these landscapes blur together, connected by the same human effort to stay warm without fire. Different methods, same goal, and wrapped in that understanding you drift onward, feeling how adaptability itself was the true inheritance passed down through generations. You drift into a softer kind of thinking now where certainty loosens and possibilities overlap. Some things about these nights were learned clearly. Others remained half understood, felt rather than proven. Even lying here, you sense that not every answer was fixed. You think about the different ways people describe the same cold. One person said it crept, another said it pressed. Another said it bit. All true, all incomplete. Experience shaped interpretation, and interpretation shaped response. You remember hearing conflicting advice earlier in the season. Add more layers, remove one, sleep closer, leave space to breathe. Each suggestion carried wisdom from a different night, a different outcome. None were wrong. Context decided. You feel how your own body responds tonight. What works for you might fail for someone else. Metabolism differs. Tolerance shifts. Even mood changes how cold feels. These differences mattered. They forced flexibility rather than rigid rules. Some practices were passed down faithfully, yet changed slightly with each retelling. A knot tied differently, an opening placed a little higher, a layer added or removed. Over time, variations accumulated, branching quietly like paths through snow. You imagine future people trying to understand nights like this without having lived them, finding traces, guessing intent, filling gaps with logic. Some things would remain unclear forever, not because they were unimportant, but because they lived only in sensation. You feel a kind of peace in that. Not everything needs a final answer. Survival does not require perfect understanding. It requires attention, adaptation, and humility. Your breathing slows further. The night accepts you as you are, warm enough, aware enough. As sleep deepens, questions soften, certainty fades. What remains is experience held gently in the body, ready to be drawn on when needed again. And with that openness settling over you, you drift onward, comfortable with what is known and what is not, trusting that both have carried people safely through nights like this for longer than memory can hold. You feel the edges of the night thinning now, not with light yet, but with a subtle change in weight. The darkness does not press as hard. The cold remains, but it has stopped deepening. This is the hour where time feels stretched, where thought drifts easily. Your body lies still, but your mind wanders gently through what you cannot see. The ground beneath you, the layers between you and the air, the people breathing nearby. All of it forms a quiet map that keeps you oriented even with your eyes closed. You sense how small adjustments have accumulated through the night. A layer pulled higher, a draft sealed, a body shifted closer. None of these actions alone made the night safe. Together they did. Survival here was never dramatic, it was incremental. You notice how the cold feels different now than it did earlier. Less sharp, more patient. This is the cold that waits for mistakes rather than forcing them. You remain still, giving it nothing to work with. Your breathing is deep and slow. Each inhale feels familiar. Each exhale leaves without urgency. The air around you holds steady. The shelter feels settled, as if it has finished adjusting to the temperature. You think about how little light matters during these hours. Sight is less useful than sensation. You know where everything is without seeing it. You know if something changes before you open your eyes. The body learns to navigate the night by feel alone. There is a faint scent of earth and hide and cold air mixed together. It is not unpleasant. It simply exists. Smells carry information too. Dampness, dryness, stability. Tonight smells balanced. You hear someone sigh softly in their sleep, not distress, just release. The group rests deeper now, confident enough to let go. You feel a moment of gratitude, quiet and brief. Not for comfort, but for adequacy. Everything is enough. That is all the night asks. As sleep thickens, again thoughts slow to fragments. Warmth, stillness, breath. The cold becomes a background presence rather than a threat. You drift deeper, carried by the knowledge that nothing more is required of you right now. The night has been negotiated. The balance holds. And wrapped in that calm acceptance, you slip back into sleep, letting the final stretch of darkness pass, without effort, trusting that morning is already on its way. You feel it before you think it, a subtle easing in the air as if the night has taken a slow breath and decided to loosen its grip. It is not warmth yet, it is permission. The cold is still present, but it no longer feels endless. Your body remains curled, conserving what it has built through the long hours. You do not rush to move. Movement too early invites chill. You wait, listening for the smallest signs of change, the faintest lightening of darkness behind closed eyes. The way the air no longer sharpens with each breath. Somewhere nearby, someone shifts more fully for the first time in hours. A deeper sigh, a stretch that goes just a little farther than before. These are the first signals that the hardest part has passed. The night has spent itself. You notice how the shelter sounds different now, materials relax, fibers soften, the quiet creaks of contraction ease, the structure that held firm through the coldest stretch begins to loosen just as you do. Your fingers flex again more confidently this time. Sensation returns without effort. No sting, no warning, just warmth spreading slowly outward. The body has done its work. You think about how mornings were anticipated without clocks or light. People learned to feel when it was safe to move again, when blood could travel freely without stealing too much heat, when tasks could resume without danger. The group stirs gradually. No sudden warm, no rush. Each person tests the air in their own time. Coverings loosen slightly. Heads lift just enough to check surroundings. The transition from night to morning is careful, deliberate. You smell cold earth again, sharper and now less muted. Morning has its own scent, clean, awake. The air feels heavier, less eager to pull warmth away. The balance shifts in your favour. You sit up just a fraction, keeping layers close. Your body responds well. No shiver, that tells you it is time. Not for action yet, but for readiness. You glance around, eyes adjusting slowly. Faces emerge from shadows, calm, rested enough. The night did not take what it wanted. As you settle back, briefly savouring this moment between darkness and day, you realise how much knowledge lived in this pause, knowing when to stay still, knowing when to move, knowing when the cold has released you. And with that understanding settling warmly in your chest, you breathe deeply and prepare for the light that will soon arrive, carrying with it the quiet victory of another night endured. You lie back one last time, not because you need to, but because this moment deserves to be held gently. Above you, the sky is beginning to change, though your eyes remain mostly closed. The darkness is thinner now, stretched almost translucent, as if the night is preparing to step aside. The cold still touches you, but it no longer feels sharp or demanding. It feels tired. You feel it in the way your breath settles easily, in the way your body no longer guards every inch of warmth so carefully. The hardest hours are behind you. You think about the stars that watched over this night, how they seemed closer in the deepest cold, how they now feel farther away, retreating as morning approaches. Lying under ancient skies like this has always carried a sense of humility. You are small but not helpless. Around you, others remain still, savouring the same pause. No one rushes. Rushing wastes the gift of survival. The shelter holds quietly, having done its work. The layers around you have shaped themselves perfectly to your body, warm in the places that matter most. You feel the ground beneath you again, solid and familiar. It no longer steals heat with the same hunger. The balance is tipped. The day will help now. You stretch just a little carefully, letting muscles wake without shock. It feels good, safe. The night has released you fully. You think about all the nights before this one, all the people who learned, adjusted, remembered. None of them knew fireplaces were coming. None of them needed to. What they had was attention, patience, and the ability to work with what surrounded them. You breathe deeply one more time, filling your lungs with cold air that no longer feels threatening. It feels clean, honest. And as the first true light begins to touch the edge of the world, you let your body relax completely, knowing you made it through another long, cold night, without walls or flames, carried instead by knowledge passed quietly from one human to the next. Now, as promised, let the world soften. The night fades slowly like a blanket being lifted with care. Sounds return in gentle layers. A distant movement, a quiet breath. The cold loosens its hold, not all at once, but enough. You feel safe here. You feel calm. Your body knows how to rest, and it knows how to wake when the time is right. There is nothing else you need to do, nothing you forgot. Let your breathing slow even more. Let your thoughts blur at the edges. If sleep is still holding you, allow it. If waking is coming, let it arrive softly. The ancient night has done its work, and so have you. Rest now. The coldest hours are over.